Good morning, everyone. Can you all hear me? Great. Special welcome here in Tampa and on live stream. As Angie mentioned after that lovely metta meditation, thank you. This talk is a continuation of Fred's talk from last Sunday, which is all part of our well-being initiative, Nurturing Well-Being. This year, our community is sort of our theme, Nourishing Well-Being. And it's not prescriptive. It's not, here, go do this. This is how you should eat. This is how you should think. It's more a series of questions. Let's take a look. What are we doing? How do we nourish our well-being? Are we doing a good job at it? Or should we make some shifts? Maybe part of the logical conclusion, but we're really just asking questions. And so that's what I want to do today, is just have us look at some things, and ask some questions. The framework for nourishing well-being, our framework for this inquiry, is the Buddha's teachings on the 4 nutriments. So we began this process looking at the first nutriment, which all relates to the body, edible food. What we drink, what we breathe, how we take care of our bodies, our sleep, our exercise, our bodies. How do we nourish our bodies so that we can be healthy, experience well-being? And those things with the body kind of are easy to see. You know, we eat healthy food, healthy body. You know, it's pretty easy to see. The other 3 nutriments have more to do with the mind and how what we feed our mind results in our experience in our mind, our feelings, our sense of well-being, happiness, ease, balance, joy. Those things we feed also. And so the second, third, and fourth nutriments have to do with how we're nourishing our minds, also our bodies as well, because bodies and minds are something we hold all together. So the second nutriment is sensory impressions, what we take in through our senses, sight, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching. Those are our sensory impressions that nourish us, or maybe not so much. The third one is intention, volition, how we are, what our deep desires are for our life, big picture, or just for our day, how our intentions feed us. And the fourth one is our mind consciousness, our mind states. How do our emotions, our conversations in our head, our ruminations, our worries, how all those things feed us as well. Okay, so we began our question, our inquiry, with the first nutriment, edible foods, and now we're moving on to sensory impressions. And Fred began that topic last week. But I said we're moving on. We're not really moving on because we want to continue all these conversations as we bring them forth. You know, we're not done with health. It's something we need to continuously bring to mind and examine in our lives. And in fact, this coming Friday, we will actually continue that conversation with a panel on having a plant-based diet. And you will hear more of that when we do our announcements today. But a panel with Fred, Dr. Reddy, who can help us with the medical and nutrition aspects of a plant-based diet, Isabella Tassi, who created Veg Fast. And we'll look at not only the physical parts of a plant-based diet, but the ethical and the big picture, sustainable living and that kind of thing. So I hope you will join us for that. I think it's getting pretty full, so please sign up. It's free. So anyway, we'll continue that conversation with the first nutriment. Now we are focusing on the second nutriment, which is sensory impressions. And Fred spoke about that last week. And when I met with him on Wednesday, he asked me if I would, he suggested that I continue on with that conversation. So our sensory impressions, imagine a house with many windows and doors. Okay. Many windows and doors that are allowing things to come in, and those things come in through the windows or the doors of our senses. Our eyes, sights, images, visual sensations. Our ears are the doors of sound, taste, smell. These are all doors, and our body sensations, what we feel, what we touch. Those are our five senses, and you can think of those as doors in your house, So the Buddha's teaching was to pay attention to this. Things are coming in. What are coming in? The Buddha instructs us to be aware of what's coming in through our sense impressions, because they really are things coming in all the time, aren't there? Right here in this room, we have visual things. The altar, the plants, we have each other. We have sounds. You might hear the air conditioning right now. Sometimes it's noisy in here, sometimes it's not, but that's the sensation of sound coming through. And all of our senses, we have windows. And we might say, why would we want to pay attention to that? What's the purpose of paying attention to what's coming in that? Why do we want to examine what's coming through our senses? The reason we want to examine that is that there is a correlation between what we consume and how we feel. There is a relationship with what we feed ourselves and our state of mind and our sense of well-being. So last week we talked about some of the things that nourish us, sensations that nourish us. Thursday I got to work in my studio and I looked at art and beauty, and then I got involved in color and texture and things, visual things that really nurture me. Texture. I spent the day nourished through that sense of, that visual sense. Felt really wonderful. This morning, I took a little walk. I watched the sunrise, the colors of the sun coming through the clouds. I could hear birds. I could hear the lapping of the water on the seawall. So those of you that were here this last week, or maybe even if you weren't, what are some things that may have nurtured you, contributed to your state of well-being, sense of goodness this week? Or even if you weren't here last week, what over this past week, looking back? You can just call it out. We don't need to do a microphone for this. Talking to a child. Hugging a child, okay? So we have that sensory sensation and that being with someone, yeah. It's nurturing. Anybody else? Feels good, doesn't it? Help out somebody, someone in need, to help them out. And seeing their face, perhaps when you did that, and maybe seeing them eat. and knowing they're being nourished. And that sense of generosity, a feeling was evoked from that action. And those sensations of perhaps gratitude for your own life and that sense of being able to give, generosity. That's good. What else? Going for a walk in the mall? Going for a walk in the neighborhood. Okay, so walking is great, and in an environment of nature. And urban, your neighborhood, I know you live fairly nearby. So houses and people living in the way they do their yards and the trees and the sky can be quite nurturing as we take those things in through our senses. One more? Eating a meal with a family. So that's certainly nourishing to taste, smell. If you were talking, there's sound, smiles, and what? The children, laughter perhaps, those kinds of things, very nurturing. So things that come in through our doors and windows can be quite and deeply moving. And that's something that we want to pay attention to. Some things are fairly neutral. They may not make a lot of impact on you. They may be filler in our lives. And some things can be quite toxic. Some things can be disturbing. Some things that we might listen to in the news, conversations that we might be listening to someone who's really complaining or gossiping or something, and it can kind of pull you down. There are ways to do that without getting pulled down, but negative conversations can be sensory input that is quite disturbing. Okay. So as we look at this, the particular topic that Fred asked me to address today is the digital world. In the last 30 years, the digital world has exploded, exponential growth in the last 30 years. And that's before cell phones. That's when we were just starting to bring computers into the business and into our homes 30 years ago. Exponential growth in the digital world. The digital world is our cell phones and our TV and our internet and our email and our computers, our laptops, our tablets, our iPads, games, websites, Googling, Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, Twitter, all kinds of the digital world. There's so much of it that we have an opportunity, and some of us need to in our jobs and want to, in many cases, want to be involved in the digital world. It's here. So I was sitting with Fred, and he said, and I was sitting there with my laptop. And he said, how many hours a day are you on your laptop? And I thought, and I had to be honest, and I don't know. I had to say, I don't know how many hours I'm on my laptop. I could say, well, it's a lot less than when I used to carry 2 laptops. I used to have a laptop for work, a PC, and a Mac for FCM and personal stuff. And, my shoulders didn't like it. That's another impact on from the digital world is not on the shoulders carrying it, but sitting in front of a screen. So anyway, I had to admit, I really don't know how much time I spent on my laptop. It varies, but it's a good question. And why is it a good question? Because if we don't know where we are, how do we get where we want to go? Okay, if I want to go to Orlando, it's valuable to know I'm in Tampa. Okay, it's valuable to know I'm in Tampa because then I can make a wise choice about whether I'm going to walk or drive or fly. And I can also navigate better. I know I'm in Tampa, so I know when I start out whether I go north, east, south, or west. Okay, so it's good to know where we are at. So I contacted Chris Lee, who's one of our members, one of our younger members who's in the field of technology. He lives in Fort Myers. And I said, I texted him, Chris, I'm interested in applications that might help me figure out how much time I spend on my computer, my cell phone, my iPad, etc. Okay. So his first response back was, why don't you take out a tablet and log it? Very low tech and logical and smart approach. And I said, well, I could do that, but I don't really work in an office. Even before I retired, I was itinerant. I moved around a lot, had a laptop, so it's not as easy to. But of course, it does make sense. And I have attempted twice to start little logs, but I haven't quite gotten there yet. And then he sent me some apps. There are apps that will monitor how long you're on your computer and Facebook and surfing the net and, how you do these various things. And he gave me a couple of them. I explored them a little bit. They cost money, like $7 a month or more, depending on how much tracking you want and how many devices you have. Most of them are free for like the first 2 weeks. So it's possible to do this without spending money. But one of them, I think it was $7 a month for up to 11 devices. And I thought, 11 devices? And so I thought, well, how many devices do I have? So let's see, I have a smartphone. And how many people in here have a smartphone? Okay. Now, if you have a smartphone, how many of you also have a computer? Okay. How many of you also have TV and that kind of capacity? I'm not sure whether I say I do or not. We definitely have TV and movies, but I don't know how to use it. So my husband has to do all that. But I do partake in it when he finds something good that I want to watch. A tablet, iPad also. Okay. And so that's 1, 2, 3, 4. How many, if you look in your life, anybody have more than 4? Okay. More than 5? 6? 7? Need I go higher? 8? Yeah. 9? Yeah. It goes up there. Okay. So perhaps having one of these applications to kind of figure out where you're at would be useful. I didn't decide to do that, but Chris Lee also sent me a form that was from the National Institute of Health. And I thought it was really well laid out. It's really for families. And each person in the family gets a chart. You put it on the refrigerator, and it says Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Computer use, how many hours, cell phone, how many hours, games, and then you put a total. And it's really to help families see how much, we'll call all of this technology, screen time. How much screen time is in your life. And it's very interesting, the National Institute of Health says, if your child is doing more than 2 hours of screen time a day, increase exercise, decrease screen time. Okay? So they're not making a comment on the quality. That's another debate. What our children, what us as adults should be watching, the quality of what's coming in, but sort of the amount. And the logic of is if a lot's coming in, we're not moving around. So their stance is to increase exercise. And the article that had this spreadsheet in it also said that the parents that were surveyed spent an average of 9 hours and 22 minutes of screen time every day. And then I read another article that said the average uses 11 hours a day of screen time. And you know how averages work. That means those of us that use less, there are many that do a lot or more. So it's interesting, and so something that we can do to take a look at, because even if all the digital were positive, and we have to examine that, that's a different conversation, but even if something is wonderful, a lot of it may not be so healthy for us, okay, as the National Institute of Health says with regard to children. And back to our house analogy, there was a really nice day this spring, and the wind was coming through. You know, it wasn't humid. I opened all the doors in the house, all the windows, and it was just wonderful. Breeze felt so good. And then I got distracted on a telephone call, and I don't know if the wind gusted up, but the wind came through. There was a big painting leaning against the wall. I heard crash. A brass statue fell on the wall. It dented the wood floor. All the papers on my desk were everywhere. All the music on the piano was everywhere. You know, so this nice breeze coming through. Too much, you know, of anything, and you know, take the metaphor and anything in your life. Too much, and too much without awareness. As I said, I was distracted. Too much without awareness coming through our senses can be a lot. So, go ahead. So one lens that we can use to look at the digital world is amount. And Fred invited us last week to do some of this logging, investigation of what's so. And it's important when we investigate what's so is to not be judgmental about it, just to be open, take a look. Checking one's email. Okay. An article in Forbes said that the average worker receives 200 emails a day, spends 2.5 hours writing and responding to emails, sends an average of 40 emails a day. I see some nodding in the back of the room from those corporately employed. And checks their email an average of 15 times a day. So I think, how many times do you check your email a day? Is a worthwhile question. Okay. And the recommendation at the bottom of the article was twice a day. You know, give yourself a window in the morning and a window in the afternoon. And these are productivity experts that are concluding this. Because we do something and then check our email, and then we do something and we check our email. And you know, that's not a productive way to spend one's time. But I would say twice a day is way low for me. How about you? I see some nodding heads. Okay. So that's something you could count. That's something you might be able to log. How many times do you check your email? Or how many times do you go on Facebook? Or do you check Instagram? Or whatever that is for you. You know, or maybe this week check email, and next week do Facebook. You know, sequentially take stock of these different digital tools that we have. And then ask yourself, do I have any, have I set up any rules for myself or for my family with regard to use of these tools? I don't take any of my 1, 2, 3, 4 digitals into my bedroom. You know, just don't do it. Some people don't take their digitals into the living room, or don't allow digitals at the dining room table. Or take digital breaks, like I think Brian does once a week. Or when you come for a day of mindfulness or go on a retreat, you take breaks. What have you established for yourself as you start to look at how many times, do you have some places where you keep this from just being out of control? My daughter's roommate, she had a roommate when she was in grad school who was in industrial design, and I was visiting. His senior project was a box that you could put your cell phone in at night. It would charge it, but it really just wasn't a charging station. It was a lock box. And it was intended to help break the habit of wanting to, stay up and check and one more thing to look up and, that energy, which we'll talk about in a minute. That compulsive energy. So, digital world, the amount of it that we are allowing into our lives is one area of contemplation. The next question I asked myself, I was wondering, I'm currently reading 2 books. One, I'm reading Moonbeams of Mahamudra, and it's a meditation textbook, meditation manual. And I'm also reading Enlightened Vagabond, which is a story of Patrul Rinpoche, a great teacher. They're both Dharma books. One, I've got the thick paper book, and one I have on my Kindle. So it occurred to me, well, what's the difference? Am I absorbing this material differently if I'm doing it with the paper book or with the Kindle? And not really sure. I still haven't come to a conclusion about the actual reading, but I went online to do a little research about it, and I came across an article that describes some of the research at Tufts University in their reading institute that they have there. Marianne Wolf was the researcher, and she was doing some research on this. And she speaks about when most of us who were born actually all of us, I would say, because in school it's encouraged that you read books, right? So those of us have learned to read, and we read books. We have learned how to do something called deep reading. Deep reading, okay? You get in a book. Have you ever just been absorbed by the story and you just get into it and you're there, present with it, page after page? It's a page turner. Or you might be reading a manual. You might be studying something, studying a biology textbook. You don't just flip through the pages and go from here to there. It's that deep reading. It's slower. It is engaging and linear because it's one thing at a time. And in her research, she compared that to what she calls scattered reading. And this is the kind of reading that we often do on the internet. Okay? So I'll give you an example. On Thursday, after I had this wonderful day in my studio painting, I had a half an hour, and I thought, okay, I'm going to go on my Kindle and read this other book that I had downloaded on Digital Detox, thinking about this talk today. And so I sat down with my iPad and I pressed in the code. And before I even got to the article, the notification that I had 5 new emails came across. So I checked my email. Okay. Then there was a notification that I got a text. My daughter texted me. So I went to that. And after the text, what did I do? I went back to the email. And then I did a conversation there. And I finally got to the Kindle. Okay. The book is kind of immediate, so whether the reading was different or not, the access was different. So distraction before I even got to the Kindle. Then I started reading it, I'm reading it along, and it says, research says, such and such. And I thought, well, what research? I better look that up, So then I'm online reading an article in the Huffington Post about something, and it was related, okay? So I'm reading it through, and then they have these buttons at the bottom, other things you might be interested in. And before I know it, I have a choice of, since the Syrian revolution, how women's lives have changed. Well, that's interesting to me. Nothing to do with this, or chewing tobacco in the Congo, or related ideas, right? But anyway, I chose something that had to do with health. This one health food item that's a sham, So I started reading that. Boy, did I get hooked. And then there's a video, and I'm watching the video, and it's going on and on and on, and it's really an infomercial, not research, etc. So the distraction, okay? And it occurs to me that I could describe this activity on the internet, in my computer, internet, texting, and email. I could call it monkey mind. Okay? Now, I would say most of us in here are meditators. Why do we meditate? Okay? We meditate because we want to cultivate a calm and stable mind. We want to develop concentration. We want to be able to cultivate a mind that can stay in one place where we want it to without jumping around. So it occurred to me that, here I sit for an hour cultivating that. And then if I go spend an hour doing this, what am I cultivating there? So ask yourself the question, what am I cultivating other times a day? Maybe I need to up my meditation. Or, you have to follow the logic yourself. But I think it was important to recognize that I was cultivating a different mindset. And so in this research on reading, deep reading, kind of sounds like our deep sharing, deep listening, doesn't it? Deep reading versus scattered reading. Okay? And at the bottom of this article it says, every day try to read something on paper. So, any questions at this point? Back. Dragos, Brian is bringing you a microphone, a little technology, so people at home can hear.
What about the work? Most of the work, all of us, or most of us, we're doing it in the computer. Does it count?
Yeah. Well, what do you think? Is your work valuable, and these tools valuable in your work?
You cannot work. Most of the work that everywhere you do, we do it in the computer.
Yeah.
We don't use paper anymore.
So what you're saying is the digital world, the tool of it, is valuable, and it's valuable to you, right?
No, I would say I would make a differentiation, because there is if we use the digital format instead of using a folder or a paper document or something, that's different than, for example, social media, which I think that's causing the distraction and everything like that. The emails are communication. In the old time, in the corporate world, you would get a courier bringing you a document or a fax or a telex or something like that. So still you would have the information that you require to answer. I don't think the email is the problem. I think the real problem is the social media that gives you this constant hyperstimulation of your brain, So
when you're at work and you use these tools for the benefit of, your doctor of medical practice, you're making a difference, you're saving paper, and we have to admit, you're making a good point. Computers were developed as great tools. When I was writing and I first had a word processor, was that amazing to be able to do that? And now I can look up spelling and spell check and all this, and to be able to communicate. I'm not making a comment at all about the value of it. What the teaching is let's be aware of it. Let's be aware of what we're doing and how it makes us feel. How does it make you feel to use these tools at work?
You don't have a choice. You have a choice if you open your Facebook. I don't have a choice. My patient's documents are in the computer. The imaging, all the reports, there is no other place to use it. So I think we should make a difference, between information proper use and stuff and the hyperstimulation of the other thing,
Yeah. So that's a great point. We haven't really touched into social media yet, but social media, we do have a choice. So thank you, Dragos, for making that point, that there is a choice. And again, the intention here is not to say the digital world's bad. I mean, it's here, and I think it's here to stay. And it has improved the quality of our lives in many ways. But let's take a look at how it's affecting our minds. And if, for example, we have to be on the computer, 8-10 hours a day, off and on, are there things you do to nourish your mind, calm your mind? Do you stop? Things to help make that a little bit easier.
You use the app Calm.
You use the app
Calm. I'm
Calm.
kidding.
There is one, though. There is an app, Calm. I think on the iPhone, there's something that'll say, I don't really know how to use it, stand up and take a walk, Yeah, great. Well, anyway, thank you so much and for bringing that up. I think we could do a whole thing on social media. It's very, very wise. Thank you. Yes.
Hi. Thank you. Hello, my name is Tressa. This is such a complex issue, but as a cultural historian, I would just like to raise the longitudinal perspective that over time, we have entered a new mode of production called the digital age. So it is about our relationship to the tools of technology, and I think we have a very opportune moment historically to be aware, as we're discussing here today, in the, for example, the previous mode of production, where, let's say, even before there were labor laws and people worked 8 to 10 hours in factories. Okay, so there wasn't the same degree, perhaps, of choice, and also there are class and ethnic and gender issues, intersectionality involved in all of these discussions that we're having. And since we're couching them not in terms of the Dharma, but in sociological terms, I wanted to raise some important, in my view, sociological issues, as a cultural historian. But with respect to the Dharma, I think the key point that I'm hearing has to do with the relationship to it. So this is always what we're doing in our practice and in our meditation practice is our mindful relationship to mind, body, self, and others. And in this case, the other may be a tool of technology, which is also a point of connectivity. So as an anthropologist, I find it amazing that I can connect with people in a global context. I feel, just in a karmic sense, very fortunate to have been born in this day and time to awaken with others globally. So I think there's a cultural critique that goes into not just deep reading and the deep web and our deep mind, but needs to, account for a greater depth that can be an entire course, which I would love to teach. So thank you very much for listening to me.
We'll have to talk about that. Yeah, what you're bringing up, that it is important that we look longitudinally, culturally at these things. And what you said about as we bring this back to the Dharma, how do we mindfully use this tool? I think might be the question that we can all ask ourselves. How do we do that? And also engage in some of these bigger questions, ethical questions about how much time people at work should have to spend on the computer and many, many other things. So thank you so much. Our relationship to our tools, how we use our tools. A knife can be used for violence. It can be used to chop vegetables. Okay, so this digital world is here. How can we mindfully use it to contribute to our well-being and the well-being of our children and the well-being of our society and everyone on the planet as this has spread and you find it in every culture. And how do we use it to the benefit? As you said, connecting with people in other countries is really wonderful. We've had an intensive this summer that had somebody in Brazil in it, someone in Stockholm that's participating, a couple people in Alaska. It's really wonderful to use the technology to bring people together to use the tool in a mindful way. So thank you very much. It's 11:42. I had wanted to talk about addiction. And that's another topic, a whole topic that is very interesting. I'm not an addiction counselor. I don't pretend to be able to give you a lot of information about it. But one of the things I wanted to note is that I came across an article that said that the title was something like, "Teens playing games is like addicts on heroin." Okay? And so then I did a little Googling, and that statement is quite what we would call emotive. It's an emotive statement. It's really not a factual statement. And if you read about it, some comments on it, you find that we talk about addiction to our addiction to Facebook, addiction to games. It's a very different means of addiction than heroin addiction. It's intermittently rewarding. Whatever keeps you doing it may be similar to someone sitting down at it's not pinball, but what do you call it? Slot machine. What keeps you going and going? It's not that you're going to win every time, but that you might sometime. So I thought that was a good way to look at. I think it's important to be aware of the possibility of our addictions to these things. And some of the words I see written, and I try to do this critically. Please know that we cannot believe everything we hear or read on the internet. I mean, that's one thing about it, right? Okay, back when we had to do research in the library and things were published, peer-reviewed, is it really true? And now, guess what? Anybody can write anything on the internet. So we have to teach our children that's not the best way to research. And for us to make sure that we're not taken by these emotive statements that are designed that way. Much of our political dialogue is emotive rather than factual or logical or critical thinking. So some of the words as I read about addiction that I think are useful: do you have an urge? Do you feel the compulsion to? Do you feel the strong desire to? Do you wake up in the morning and you gotta check Facebook to see what happened? Do you feel compelled to check your email or your Facebook? So those are those things that I think that are valuable in bringing into our awareness, again, our mindfulness of what's going on, so we can see, is this compulsion turning into an addiction? And to see if it's healthy for us. I noticed a while back when I was playing these 2 games on my iPad. I was playing solitaire, and I was playing a math Doku. I love math. And I could feel that want to keep going. I could really feel it. And so I had this rule for myself, only 2 games at a time. But you know what my mind did? 2 games solitaire, 2 games math Doku, 2 games. My mind totally sabotaged my rule. So I did something that may be very wise, How do you stop eating chocolate chip cookies? You throw them away. How do you stop playing those games? You just hit the delete, and that's what I did. So, again, the conversations about social media, the addictive qualities, the conversations that I've seen about the addiction, where people start to notice they're so involved in these things that their minds are agitated. So when you're doing this, how's your mind? Okay, how is your mind? Is it agitated from doing this? Or can you do it calmly? It may be that we have some control over our approach to do something mindfully. Negative conversations can really bring us down. But if you're a counselor or you're trained in deep sharing and deep listening, somebody's negative conversation can bring forth in you compassion and ways of approaching things that are valuable. So I guess I have brought up a lot of conversations. We still have time just to do a little sharing. So let's take the time now to get in groups of 3 or 4 and share with each other just takeaway from today. What have you noticed? Or your takeaway might be a question you're going to ask yourself this next week. And so if you could get in groups of 3 or 4. Okay, would you give me a bell, please? You just go ahead, do a bell. Just stop a bell. Okay, that's the bell to let me talk a little bit here. Can I have everybody's attention? Okay. So I'm going to ask Angie to do 1, 2, 3, a series of bells. The first bell will be for the first person to speak. The second bell will be to change to the second person if you haven't yet. The second bell to change to the third if you haven't yet. The third bell to change to the fourth if you have one, or someone else can bow in. And what we want to do is deep sharing, deep listening, which means we're not cross-talking or giving each other advice. We're just sharing what our own experience is. When it's our turn, you put your hands together, bow in if you like. It's your turn. Everybody else just listens. Okay, and we listen without judgment, without trying to fix that person or plan our talk. We just want to be present. There's no good or bad here. We're just being ourselves and expressing ourselves in this. And this is an opportunity to do that. So with the next bell, it'll be the first person's opportunity to bow in. See, 2 minutes? Mm-hmm. Okay. And switch to the next person. And now the third person. And the fourth person, if you have one. Okay, thank you, everyone, for that. It appeared to be some lively conversations. And as we continue this exploration of sense impressions, what we're allowing through our doors and windows this week and in coming weeks, may your experience, your travels within the digital world, may they be mindful and insightful. And that may your insights lead to positive change if you see that there is the value of positive change. And may we have more sensory input opportunities. May we bring those into our lives, more of them that are promoting goodness and health and well-being and happiness and balance.